Think you know who's winning the AI arms race? Think again. The very strategies meant to secure dominance are backfiring, and fast.
Welcome to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here with me today, because we've got a seriously fascinating roadmap ahead. We're looking at this totally unprecedented, interconnected web that is literally reshaping our world in real time. I mean, just in the last 72 hours, we've seen billions of dollars mobilize in direct response to international policy shifts, all while physical supply chains are bracing for impact. So today we're dissecting the three monumental forces driving this week's absolute biggest news. We're talking the geopolitics of tech policy, massive sweeps in global capital, and the physical hardware that actually anchors it all to reality. These three pillars are colliding in ways nobody completely predicted, and they're basically rewriting the rules of the entire tech industry in the process.
And you know, all of this begs a truly fascinating question. Is the attempt to control AI actually accelerating global competition? It sounds totally counterintuitive, right? I mean, historically, the logic has always been that if you put up a regulatory wall or an embargo, you're going to successfully starve your competitors of resources and just slow them down. But in the realm of advanced computing, what if those geopolitical gatekeeping measures are having the exact opposite effect? What if, by trying to fiercely lock down the underlying technology, these policies are actually pouring rocket fuel on a decentralized global arms race? Okay, let's dive into this.
So the intended outcome of recent U.S. export controls was pretty straightforward: slow down international competitors by cutting off their access to top-tier hardware. We're specifically talking about advanced NVIDIA chips here, like the A100s and H100s, as well as access to top U.S. software models. The whole thesis was that restricting the best tools practically guarantees the competition is going to fall behind. But look at the actual outcome playing out right now. It is vastly different. Chinese labs and other international competitors are rapidly gaining ground. Instead of just sitting there paralyzed by hardware scarcity, labs like Alibaba with their Qwen models and DeepSeek, well, they've been forced into extreme algorithmic optimization because they couldn't just throw 50,000 raw GPUs at a problem. They had to innovate on the architecture itself, creating these highly efficient models that are now topping open source leaderboards. And this brilliantly illustrates how restricting access is actively accelerating competitor advancements. When you force brilliant engineers into a corner of artificial scarcity, they don't just give up. No, they engineer a highly optimized way out.
Of course, that kind of aggressive policy shift doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? It immediately dictates where the smart money flows. Which brings us to our next major pillar, capital. The direct market reaction to this shifting geopolitical landscape is just perfectly captured by DeepSeek's monumental new funding round. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars raised at a multi-billion-dollar valuation and mobilized with astonishing speed. Investors took one look at DeepSeek's mixture of experts architecture, which basically proves you can train world-class intelligence using older, restricted hardware, and they realized that a regulatory moat built entirely on hardware restriction is actually pretty fragile. When a company proves they can bypass the compute bottleneck through sheer mathematical ingenuity, capital immediately floods in to scale that alternative architecture.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the shifting financial landscape triggers a global ripple effect. This isn't just about one specific lab getting a massive check. It's a permanent geographic expansion of the entire AI race. First off, the global funding race is just boiling over. We're seeing sovereign wealth funds like Saudi Arabia's massive $40 billion AI fund and the UAE's technology investment firm MGX aggressively deploying capital. They're buying compute and backing independent models to build their own sovereign AI capabilities. Honestly, capital flows are accelerating at a speed that makes the dot-com boom look like a casual stroll in the park. The competition is officially no longer confined to a few zip codes in Silicon Valley. It's a decentralized sprint now, and investors are just racing to back the dominant players outside of those restricted zones before the window entirely closes.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the most critical bottleneck of all: hardware. Because listen, you can have the absolute most highly optimized software in the world, and you can have sovereign funds throwing billions of dollars your way, but none of it executes without the physical chips to run the math. This is exactly why Qualcomm's potential acquisition of an AI edge computing chip startup is such a crucial indicator for us to look at. Right now, the entire world is basically fighting over massive cloud servers to handle AI training. But Qualcomm? They're looking at the complete other end of the pipeline. In acquiring the tech to put powerful neural processing units, or NPUs, directly into smartphones and local devices, they're trying to bypass that cloud compute bottleneck entirely. Running AI locally cuts server costs, slashes latency, and grounds this very abstract software race into cold, hard, physical endpoints.
There's this really profound truth circulating in the industry right now.
Hardware and chip deals matter vastly more than people realize. It's incredibly easy to get entirely mesmerized by the magic of text-to-video generators on our screens, but that entire global ambition, it completely rests on the physical limits of the supply chain. We are talking about severe bottlenecks at TSMC for CoWoS, that's chip-on-wafer on substrate packaging. You can literally have unlimited funding, but if you cannot get your silicon physically packaged because the foundries are booked out for 18 solid months, well, you don't really have an AI company, you just have a wait list. So the crucial point is that controlling the hardware layer, the lithography machines, the foundries, the packaging pipelines, that is the actual ultimate battleground of the AI boom.
All right, shifting gears really quick, let's take a rapid-fire look at the immediate vulnerabilities this breakneck pace creates in the ecosystem. First up, this highly critical NPM supply chain security scare. Modern AI applications, they aren't built from scratch. They rely on thousands of open-source software dependencies. And recently, we've seen bad actors execute dependency confusion and typo squatting attacks, basically injecting malicious code into foundational NPM packages that might be maintained by a single developer but are downloaded millions of times. When that happens, the vulnerability flows directly downstream into enterprise AI environment variables and poisoning data. It is a stark, slightly terrifying reminder that our multi-trillion-dollar AI infrastructure is frequently resting on a security foundation made of toothpicks.
And snapping right to our next rapid-fire update, meanwhile, in the physical world, the scale of infrastructure is becoming almost incomprehensible. NVIDIA's massive expansion of its manufacturing and data center footprint is undeniable proof of this exploding demand. We're no longer just talking about building standard server racks. No, the ecosystem now requires multi-gigawatt data centers that consume as much power as small cities. The physical infrastructure of the planet is literally being re-engineered right in front of us. They're pouring millions of tons of concrete and securing dedicated nuclear power agreements just to feed the compute requirements of the next generation of models. The abstraction of artificial intelligence is rapidly becoming the heaviest, most energy-intensive physical industry on Earth.
Which brings us to our final, massive question for this explainer. Where is AI heading next as policy, capital, and hardware collide? We've seen today how locking down tech policy counterintuitively sparks aggressive, optimized innovation and sovereign funding globally. And we've seen how all of that limitless software ambition is ultimately totally bottlenecked by the extreme physical realities of silicon packaging and our power grids. If software is constrained by borders, but silicon is constrained by physics, the winner of this global race isn't just whoever writes the best code, it's whoever controls the atoms. I really want you to think about that. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you found this deep dive helpful, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss our next explainer, where we'll continue to decode the complex systems running our world. Until next time, stay focused and keep learning.